Welcome back to Mr. Mystery, where the line between reality and the unknown gets a little blurrier each night. I'm your host, and tonight we're diving into something that's been haunting Japanese highways for decades. Before we begin this chilling journey, I want to know, where are you listening from tonight? Drop your city and country in the comments below. Are you tucked in bed in Toronto? Maybe driving through the quiet streets of Manchester? Perhaps you're in Tokyo itself, where tonight's story takes place? It really helps the channel grow. And honestly, knowing you're out there listening makes these late night tales even more special. But let me know where you are. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. And hey, if you enjoyed tonight's story, give it a thumbs up. Now let's talk about highways. Most of us have driven them. Those long stretches of asphalt that cut through the darkness, connecting cities, connecting lives. But what happens when something else decides to use them? Something that shouldn't be there at all. Tonight, we're heading to Japan's expressway system, where for over 40 years, drivers have been reporting encounters with a woman who appears from nowhere, and disappears just as mysteriously. They call her the Expressway Ghost, and her story is one that blurs the line between urban legend and terrifying reality. So settle in, dim the lights, and let me tell you about the phantom hitchhiker who has been riding Japan's highways since the 1970s. She's not waving, not trying to flag him down. She was standing perfectly still, facing the oncoming traffic. No movement at all, like a statue. She's just standing there, in the middle of nowhere, at 2:30 in the morning, because sometimes the most frightening stories are the ones that might just be true. Picture this. It's 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday night in 1979. He'd been driving taxi for 15 years, and he'd helped plenty of people in trouble, of course. Come on, my family is waiting. So he pulls over about 50 meters past where she was standing and puts his hazard lights on. Hiroshi Tanaka, and yes, that's his real name from the police reports, is driving his taxi down the Mishin Expressway between Kyoto and Osaka. He glances in the rearview mirror and sees her sitting perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. The highway is nearly empty, just the occasional truck rumbling past in the opposite direction. The radio is playing soft jazz. He later described them as empty, like looking into a deep well. And Hiroshi is thinking about getting home to his wife and newborn daughter. That's when he sees her, and his heart nearly stops. She's still staring straight ahead, but now there are tears streaming down her face. It's not normal tears. These look black in the dim light of the car. As they're walking, Hiroshi glances down and notices something that makes his blood run cold. In 1978, I was going to see my family in Osaka for New Year's. I never made it. The woman isn't making any sound when she walks. No footsteps, nothing. He wants to pull over, wants to get out of the car, but something keeps him driving. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's curiosity, or maybe something else entirely. It's too wide, and it doesn't reach her eyes. Standing on the side of the expressway, just beyond the guardrail, is a woman in a white dress. The interior light doesn't seem to illuminate her properly. It's like she's sitting in shadow, even with the light on. Now here's where it gets interesting. Hiroshi later told police that something about her posture seemed wrong. Nothing. No woman. No white dress. No sign that anyone had been there at all. But Hiroshi was a good man. He gets out of his car and walks back toward her, calling out, "Miss, are you all right? Do you need help?" The woman turns toward him, and Hiroshi freezes. Her face is pale. Not just pale, but white as porcelain in her eyes. "I need to get to Osaka," she says, in a voice that sounds like it's coming from far away. Hiroshi nods and gestures toward his taxi. He follows him to the car, and here's where the story gets really strange. But he's committed now, right? So he opens the back door for her, and she slides in. "Where in Osaka?" Hiroshi asks, starting the engine. "Sumiyoshi District," she replies, "near the shrine." Hiroshi knows the area well. It's about a 40-minute drive. They drive in silence for the first 10 minutes. Then Hiroshi tries to make conversation. "Are you from Osaka originally?" No response. He tries again. "It's pretty late to be out walking. Is everything okay?" Still nothing. He adjusts his rearview mirror to get a better look at her, "Miss," says, his voice shaking slightly. "Are you crying?" She turns to look at him in the mirror, and when their eyes meet, she smiles. But it's not a normal smile. "I died on this highway," she says in that distant voice. Hiroshi's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. That's impossible, he manages to say. Is it? She asks. Look at me again. Against his better judgment, Hiroshi looks in the rearview mirror. The back seat is empty. He slams on the brakes so hard the car skids. He's breathing heavily, heart pounding, turns around to look at the back seat directly, except for one thing. The seat is soaking wet, and there's a smell in the car now, like pond water and old flowers. The smell of death. Now, you might be thinking, okay, interesting story, but one frightened taxi driver doesn't make a legend. And you'd be right. But here's the thing. Hiroshi Tanaka wasn't the only one. 3 weeks later, on February 15, 1979, another driver had almost the exact same experience. This time it was Kenji Nakamura, a truck driver hauling electronics from Tokyo to Kobe. But when they arrived at the location, it was an empty lot. Same highway, same time of night, same woman in white. But Kenji's story had a twist. Kenji turned around to ask his passenger what was going on, and she was gone. Her car had skidded on black ice and hit the guardrail at almost the exact spot, where both Hiroshi and Kenji had first seen the woman in white. He went to the local library and looked through old newspaper archives. What he found made him sick to his stomach. When the woman got into his truck, she gave him a specific address in Osaka. The house had been demolished 6 months after her death. It had been 4 years, according to the locals. The next morning, curious and more than a little spooked, Kenji did some digging, always disappearing before reaching her destination. Every driver described the same woman, pale, dressed in white, with that distant voice and those empty eyes. On January 3, 1978, a 23-year-old woman named Yuki Sato had died in a car accident on the Meishin Expressway. She was driving from Kyoto to Osaka to visit her family for the New Year's celebration. But how do you explain someone appearing in multiple places along a 100-kilometer stretch of highway? How do you explain the disappearances? The newspaper article included a photo of Yuki Sato. It was the same woman. But here's where it gets even stranger. The address the ghost had given Kenji. It was Yuki's childhood home. He was researching modern urban legends, and the expressway ghost seemed like the perfect case study. Word about these encounters started to spread, quietly at first. You know how it is in Japan. People don't like to talk about strange things openly. Suzuki worked for a weekly magazine called Mystery Japan. He was always looking for stories that walked the line between journalism and the paranormal. But truck drivers talk to each other, taxi drivers share stories, and slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The woman in white was appearing to drivers on the Meishin Expressway with surprising regularity. Always between midnight and 4 a.m., always asking to go to Osaka. But on the 15th night, his patience paid off. By the end of 1979, there had been at least 12 documented encounters, standing exactly where Hiroshi Tanaka had first spotted her 2 years earlier. He had a camera in his passenger seat, a tape recorder, and a notebook. He was going to document everything. The woman in white, motionless by the guardrail. The way she seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I'm going to record our conversation if that's okay.
Hey.
I'm a journalist. The overwhelming sense of cold that seemed to radiate from her started driving the Meishin Expressway every night between midnight and 4 a.m., hoping to encounter the ghost himself. I say documented because these were the ones where drivers actually filed reports with police or highway patrol. How many more drivers saw her and just never spoke about it, we'll never know. But what really caught the attention of paranormal researchers was the consistency of the details. They all mentioned the lack of footsteps, the way light didn't seem to touch her properly, and that smell of pond water and old flowers. Some tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a living person playing pranks. How do you explain the wet seat and the smell? By 1980, the story had caught the attention of Dr. Takeshi Yamamoto, a professor of folklore at Kyoto University. I know you were trying to get home to your family. Dr. Yamamoto spent months interviewing drivers, collecting testimonies, and trying to find rational explanations. She was beautiful, with long black hair and delicate features. But there was something wrong with her neck. It was bent at an unnatural angle. I promised my mother I'd be home for New Year's. I promised my little sister I'd bring her a gift from Kyoto. I promised my father I'd help him with the shrine preparations. I remember the ice, the spinning, the impact. And I'm back at the highway, waiting for someone to help me try again. But the more he dug, the more convinced he became that something genuinely unexplainable was happening on that highway. In his 1981 paper, Modern Phantoms, the Expressway Ghost Phenomenon, he wrote something that still gives me chills. I died on that highway, and part of me will always be there, waiting. The evidence suggests we are dealing with a genuine apparition, a soul so traumatized by sudden death that it continues to attempt completing its final journey. Night after night, year after year, Dr. Yamamoto's paper caught the attention of someone else, a young investigative journalist named IHere Suzuki. As he took the ramp, he said, "We're almost there, and maybe this time will be different." It had been running the entire time, but when he played it back, all he heard was his own voice asking questions to empty air. And when she did, the temperature in the car plummeted. Suzuki could see his breath, infinitely sad. In March 1981, Suzuki decided to conduct his own investigation. But he wasn't content to just interview witnesses. He wanted to experience the phenomenon firsthand. So he did something that, honestly, I'm not sure I'd have the courage to do. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Just long, lonely drives through the darkness. But the road was icy, and I was driving too fast. I wanted to get there for midnight. For the New Year prayers, it was 2:15 a.m. on a foggy Tuesday when Suzuki saw her. But Suzuki was prepared, pulled over and approached her, just like the others had done. "Excuse me, miss. Do you need help?" She turned toward him with that same porcelain white face and empty eyes. "I need to get to Osaka. My family is waiting." Suzuki nodded and led her to his car, but as they walked, he was taking mental notes of everything. The lack of footsteps. Once they were in the car, Suzuki reached for his tape recorder. She didn't respond, just stared straight ahead like all the others had described. Suzuki started the recorder and began driving. "Can you tell me your name?" Silence. "How long have you been waiting by the highway?" Nothing. For 20 minutes, he tried to get her to talk while driving toward Osaka. Finally, he decided to be direct. "Are you Yuki Sato?" For the first time, she turned to look at him. "You know my name," she said, and her voice was different now. Not distant, but sad. "I know about the accident," Suzuki said gently. She nodded, and those black tears started streaming down her face again. "I was so close to home." Suzuki glanced in his rearview mirror and saw her clearly for the first time. "Why do you keep trying to make this journey?" he asked. "'Cause I promised," she whispered. Her voice was breaking now, and Suzuki felt something he hadn't expected. Genuine sympathy for this lost soul. "But you can't complete the journey, can you?" he said softly. She shook her head. "I get close, so close. But then I remember what happened." Suzuki was so absorbed in the conversation that he almost missed the exit for Sumiyoshi District. But when he looked in the rearview mirror, she was already fading. He could see right through her to the back seat. "I can't," she said, her voice now barely a whisper. "I could never make it home." And then she was gone. Suzuki pulled over immediately and checked his tape recorder. There was no record of her responses, no evidence of their conversation, but the smell was there. Pond water and old flowers. The back seat was soaking wet. Now, if you're still with me, you might be wondering what happened to IHere Suzuki after his encounter. Did he publish his story? Did he convince anyone of what he'd experienced? The answer is complicated. Without the audio recording as proof, it was just another ghost story. What he discovered was a tragedy that went deeper than just a car accident. The magazine published it, but as entertainment rather than journalism. She was engaged to be married to her college sweetheart, and the wedding was planned for the following spring. Suzuki did write about his experience, but his editor at Mystery Japan was skeptical. But Suzuki wasn't deterred. He became obsessed with the case, spending years researching not just the expressway ghost, but the real Yuki Sato. Yuki Sato had been 23 years old when she died. A junior high school teacher from Kyoto. She was driving to Osaka on New Year. Eve 1977 to introduce her to her grandparents for the first time. The medical examiner noted it in the report, but couldn't explain it. 13 minutes before, she would have completed her journey. The accident happened at 11:47 p.m., just 13 minutes before she would have arrived at her family's home. But here's the detail that haunted Suzuki. According to the police report, Yuki had been thrown from the car during the crash. She looked so sad, so lost. I try to call out to her, but she always disappears. Yuki's younger sister, Tomoko, confirmed her mother's story. Her body was found 30 meters from the wreckage, but here's the strange part. She was still wearing her white dress. It's the same one she'd put on that morning to look nice for meeting her family. The dress was completely clean. There's no blood, no dirt, no sign of the violent crash that had killed her. But when Suzuki described his encounter with the ghost, something changed in her expression. She said she'd be home for New Year's. She's still trying to make it. Suzuki tracked down Yuki's family in 1983. Her mother, Michiko Sato, was initially reluctant to talk about her daughter's death. "You've seen her?" Michiko asked, tears forming in her eyes. "I believe so," Suzuki replied carefully. Michiko was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that made Suzuki's blood run cold. "She's been home, you know. Several times over the years, I've seen her standing in the garden, still wearing that white dress." The story had spread beyond professional drivers to the general public, and more people were looking for her. In 1987, a young couple driving home from a concert in Kyoto picked up a woman in white on the same stretch of highway. Suzuki asked if he could interview other family members, but when they arrived at the address, it was an empty lot. The back seat was wet, and there was that distinctive smell, pond water and old flowers. Construction workers later told them it had been empty for over a decade. She seemed so lost, so desperate to get home. I actually hope she finds peace somehow. She'd seen Yuki at least 3 times since the accident, always in the same white dress, always looking lost and confused. In the early 2000s, Japanese websites dedicated to paranormal experiences were filled with expressway ghost encounters. It was as if Yuki's spirit was becoming stronger, more aware of her situation. The details were remarkably consistent, even from people who claimed to have never heard the story before. She talked about her students, about her family. She seemed so real, so alive. It was only when we got close to Osaka that she started to fade. "I need people to remember, or I'll never find peace." When Yuki got into his truck, she didn't just ask to go to Osaka. She talked. "I think she's trying to keep her promise," Tomoko said. "We thought she was just someone whose car had broken down," Miki said. "She was so polite, so quiet. She asked us to take her to Osaka, to her family." But here's the most chilling part of Suzuki's investigation. He discovered that Yuki's appearances were unrandom. She showed up at the family home on the anniversary of her death, and she appeared on the highway most frequently in the weeks leading up to New Year's. As Yuki was disappearing, she looked directly at him and said she was stuck in a loop, endlessly trying to complete the journey that death had interrupted. You might think that as Japan modernized, as highways got better lighting and more traffic, the expressway ghost would fade away, but you'd be wrong. In fact, encounters with Yuki Sato seemed to increase through the 1980s and 1990s. But she wasn't just appearing to people who were looking for her. They weren't familiar with the legend, had never heard of Yuki Sato, but their description matched perfectly. The woman who introduced herself as Miki Tanaka told me her story in 1995 when I was researching an article about modern folklore. But as they drove, Miki noticed something odd. She kept apologizing, Miki remembered. She kept saying she was sorry for being late, sorry for causing trouble, and she was crying, but she was trying to hide it. When they reached Osaka, the woman directed them to a residential area in Sumiyoshi district. They turned around to ask their passenger what was going on, but she was gone. It wasn't until months later that Miki heard about the expressway ghost legend and realized what had happened. "It sounds crazy," she told me, "but I felt so sorry for her." Stories like this became more common as the internet age arrived. But something else was happening too. The encounters were becoming more intense, more detailed. In 2003, a truck driver named Satoshi Koba reported an encounter that was different from all the others. She told me about her life. Satoshi later wrote on a paranormal forum, but the most disturbing part of Satoshi's account was what happened at the end. "Please don't forget me. Please don't let my story die." Now, if you're still with me, you might be wondering what happened to Akira Suzuki after his encounter. Did he publish his story? Did he convince anyone of what he'd experienced? The answer is complicated. Without the audio recording as proof, it was just another ghost story. What he discovered was a tragedy that went deeper than just a car accident. The magazine published it, but as entertainment rather than journalism. She was engaged to be married to her college sweetheart, and the wedding was planned for the following spring. Suzuki did write about his experience, but his editor at Mystery Japan was skeptical. But Suzuki wasn't deterred. He became obsessed with the case, spending years researching not just the expressway ghost, but the real Yuki Sato. Yuki Sato had been 23 years old when she died. A junior high school teacher from Kyoto. She was driving to Osaka on New Year. Eve 1977 to introduce her to her grandparents for the first time. The medical examiner noted it in the report, but couldn't explain it. 13 minutes before, she would have completed her journey. The accident happened at 11:47 p.m., just 13 minutes before she would have arrived at her family's home. But here's the detail that haunted Suzuki. According to the police report, Yuki had been thrown from the car during the crash. She looked so sad, so lost. I try to call out to her, but she always disappears. Yuki's younger sister, Tomoko, confirmed her mother's story. Her body was found 30 meters from the wreckage, but here's the strange part. She was still wearing her white dress. It's the same one she'd put on that morning to look nice for meeting her family. The dress was completely clean. There's no blood, no dirt, no sign of the violent crash that had killed her. But when Suzuki described his encounter with the ghost, something changed in her expression. She said she'd be home for New Year's. She's still trying to make it. Suzuki tracked down Yuki's family in 1983. Her mother, Michiko Sato, was initially reluctant to talk about her daughter's death. "You've seen her?" Michiko asked, tears forming in her eyes. "I believe so," Suzuki replied carefully. Michiko was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that made Suzuki's blood run cold. "She's been home, you know. Several times over the years, I've seen her standing in the garden, still wearing that white dress." The story had spread beyond professional drivers to the general public, and more people were looking for her. In 1987, a young couple driving home from a concert in Kyoto picked up a woman in white on the same stretch of highway. Suzuki asked if he could interview other family members, but when they arrived at the address, it was an empty lot. The back seat was wet, and there was that distinctive smell, pond water and old flowers. Construction workers later told them it had been empty for over a decade. She seemed so lost, so desperate to get home. I actually hope she finds peace somehow. She'd seen Yuki at least 3 times since the accident, always in the same white dress, always looking lost and confused. In the early 2000s, Japanese websites dedicated to paranormal experiences were filled with expressway ghost encounters. It was as if Yuki's spirit was becoming stronger, more aware of her situation. The details were remarkably consistent, even from people who claimed to have never heard the story before. She talked about her students, about her family. She seemed so real, so alive. It was only when we got close to Osaka that she started to fade. I need people to remember, or I'll never find peace. When Yuki got into his truck, she didn't just ask to go to Osaka. She talked. "I think she's trying to keep her promise," Tomoko said. "We thought she was just someone whose car had broken down," Miki said. "She was so polite, so quiet. She asked us to take her to Osaka, to her family." But here's the most chilling part of Suzuki's investigation. He discovered that Yuki's appearances were unrandom. She showed up at the family home on the anniversary of her death, and she appeared on the highway most frequently in the weeks leading up to New Year's. As Yuki was disappearing, she looked directly at him and said she was stuck in a loop, endlessly trying to complete the journey that death had interrupted. You might think that as Japan modernized, as highways got better lighting and more traffic, the expressway ghost would fade away, but you'd be wrong. In fact, encounters with Yuki Sato seemed to increase through the 1980s and 1990s. But she wasn't just appearing to people who were looking for her. They weren't familiar with the legend, had never heard of Yuki Sato, but their description matched perfectly. The woman who introduced herself as Miki Tanaka told me her story in 1995 when I was researching an article about modern folklore. But as they drove, Miki noticed something odd. She kept apologizing, Miki remembered. She kept saying she was sorry for being late, sorry for causing trouble, and she was crying, but she was trying to hide it. When they reached Osaka, the woman directed them to a residential area in Sumiyoshi district. They turned around to ask their passenger what was going on, but she was gone. It wasn't until months later that Miki heard about the expressway ghost legend and realized what had happened. It sounds crazy, she told me, but I felt so sorry for her. Stories like this became more common as the internet age arrived. But something else was happening too. The encounters were becoming more intense, more detailed. In 2003, a truck driver named Satoshi Koba reported an encounter that was different from all the others. She told me about her life. Satoshi later wrote on a paranormal forum, but the most disturbing part of Satoshi's account was what happened at the end. Please don't forget me. Please don't let my story die. By 2005, the expressway ghost had become such a persistent legend that it attracted the attention of Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, a parapsychologist at Tokyo University. Dr. Nakamura was a skeptic by nature, but he was also a rigorous scientist who believed that unexplained phenomena deserved serious investigation. He assembled a team of researchers, including physicists, psychologists, and even a former police detective. Their goal was to either debunk the legend or find scientific evidence for paranormal activity. The team spent 6 months conducting what they called the Mission Project. They set up monitoring equipment along the highway, interviewed hundreds of witnesses, and even conducted controlled experiments where team members drove the route repeatedly. What they found was surprising, even to Dr. Nakamura. First, they discovered that electromagnetic readings along the stretch of highway where Yuki had died showed consistent anomalies. The readings were strongest between midnight and 4 a.m., and they peaked on the anniversary of her death. Second, they found that the soil and vegetation near the crash site had unusual properties. Plants grew differently there, and soil samples showed traces of minerals that shouldn't have been present in that area. But the most compelling evidence came from their interview with Koji Ishikawa, a highway maintenance worker who had been working that section of road for over 20 years. "I've seen her," Koji told the research team. "Not just once or twice, but dozens of times. She's always there on New Year's Eve, standing by the guardrail, always in that white dress." What made Koji's testimony particularly credible was that he'd never spoken publicly about his encounters before. He'd been afraid people would think he was crazy or drunk on the job. "No one can help me. I'm already dead." "The first time I saw her was in 1985, Koji said. "I stopped trying to help her after the third or fourth time. I realized what she was. I was doing overnight maintenance, and I saw this woman standing by the side of the road. I thought she was in trouble, so I stopped my truck and got out to help." In paranormal research, we often find that traumatic events can leave what we call psychic imprints on a location, he explained. The number of car accidents on that stretch of highway was significantly higher than the national average, especially between midnight and 4 a.m. But when Koji approached her, she looked at him with those empty eyes and said, "You can't help me." Then she vanished. I saw her standing by the guardrail, just like all the witnesses had described. As a scientist after that, I saw her regularly, Koji continued. Always in the same spot, always looking so sad. They found compelling evidence for anomalous phenomena associated with the legend. Dr. Nakamura's team also discovered something else interesting. "Please help me go home." On the final night of their research, he claims to have encountered Yuki himself. "We're dealing with a human soul in terrible pain, trapped between life and death. Has she found peace? Has she finally made it home?" Many drivers reported feeling suddenly cold or disoriented while driving through the area. There are dozens of YouTube videos, Twitter threads, and TikTok posts about encounters with the expressway ghost. Some are clearly fake, created for views and likes. But others have that ring of truth that's hard to dismiss. This was what we'd been looking for. I just stood there, maybe 20 meters away, and we looked at each other. Could Yuki's presence be affecting moving drivers? Dr. Nakamura thought it was possible. The video shows a figure in white standing by the highway, and you can hear Takeshi's voice saying, "Oh my God, it's her. It's really her." The emotional energy of the original trauma can influence the physical world in subtle ways. Instead of just asking for rides to Osaka, she started delivering messages. But instead of asking to go to Osaka, she gave him a specific address in Kyoto and asked him to deliver a message to the people living there. But wait, ... There's an elderly woman here whose daughter was named Yuki. She died in a car accident many years ago. She was 89 years old and had been living in the nursing home for 2 years. When Kenji delivered the message, Michiko started crying. After all these years, she's still trying to keep her promise. Her last words were, "It's okay, Yuki. You can rest now. Tell them she's been trying to come home for so long, but she can't find the way." Some paranormal researchers believe that Yuki's spirit found peace when her mother died. Finally releasing her from the endless loop of trying to get home, a woman asked to go to Osaka disappeared before reaching her destination, and left behind the distinctive smell of pond water and old flowers. The team's final report, published in the Journal of Paranormal Research in 2006, concluded that, while they couldn't definitively prove the existence of the expressway ghost, but for Dr. Nakamura, the investigation became personal. The video appeared to be genuine, instead of asking for rides. "I was driving alone around 2 a.m., he told me in a 2010 interview. I should have been excited. Real in the sense that she represents something fundamental about human nature. Our need to keep our promises. To make it home to the people we love. To find peace after trauma." But instead of excitement, Dr. Nakamura felt overwhelming sadness. She looked so lost, so helpless. She reminds us that life is fragile, that we shouldn't take our loved ones for granted, and that sometimes the most important journeys are the ones that bring us home. The electromagnetic anomalies, the hundreds of witness accounts, the physical effects like the wet seats and the smell, a reminder that somewhere out there, a young woman is still trying to make it home for New Year's. Eve. I pulled over and got out of the car, but I didn't approach her. Maybe that's all any of us can ask for. To be remembered, to have our stories told, to know that even in death, we're not forgotten. Dart. After several minutes, Yuki began to fade. But before she disappeared completely, she spoke to him, she said. Dr. Nakamura never published a personal account of his encounter, but he told me it changed his perspective on the paranormal forever. "Realize that we're not dealing with a simple ghost story," he said. Now, you might be wondering what's happened to the expressway ghost in recent years. The answer is complicated. Social media has brought new attention to Yuki's story. In 2018, a YouTube creator named Takeshi Yamada posted a video that went viral in Japan. He claimed to have filmed an encounter with Yuki using a dash cam. The figure appears to turn toward the camera, and for just a moment, you can see a pale face with dark eyes. Then the video cuts out. Skeptics pointed out that the video could easily be faked with modern technology. But analysis by digital forensics experts found no evidence of manipulation. More importantly, Takeshi's description of the encounter matched all the historical accounts. But there's been a new development in recent years. Some witnesses report that Yuki's behavior has changed. In 2020, a taxi driver named Kenji Morimoto picked up a woman in white on the Mission Expressway. "Tell them that Yuki says she's sorry," the woman said. Kenji was confused but agreed to deliver the message. When he arrived at the address, he found it was a nursing home. The woman at the front desk looked puzzled when he explained why he was there. "We don't have any residents named Yuki," she said. The elderly woman turned out to be Michiko Sato, Yuki's mother.
Ow.
"She's still trying to come home," Michiko whispered. That night, according to the nursing home staff, Michiko passed away peacefully in her sleep. Since then, sightings of the expressway ghost have decreased dramatically. But others aren't so sure. There have been a few reported encounters in 2021 and 2022. Though they're different from the classic pattern, the woman in white just waves at passing cars as if saying goodbye. So what's the truth about the expressway ghost? Is she real, or just a persistent urban legend that's taken on a life of its own? After researching this story for years, talking to witnesses, investigators, and even Yuki's surviving family members, I've come to a conclusion that might surprise you. I think she's real. Not in the way that you or I are real, but real in a way that's more important. The evidence is too consistent, too detailed, and too persistent to dismiss. But more than that, I think Yuki Sato has become a symbol of something we all fear, dying before we can say goodbye, leaving promises unfulfilled, being separated from the people we love. The fact that her story has persisted for over 40 years, that it's been passed down through generations of drivers, tells us something important about the power of storytelling and the human need to believe in something beyond death. The story of the expressway ghost has had a profound impact on Japanese culture, far beyond just being a scary story to tell late at night. It's become a modern folktale, a cautionary tale, and for some, a source of comfort. In 2015, a monument was erected near the site of Yuki's accident. It's not an official memorial. The highway department didn't put it up. Instead, It was placed there by drivers who had encountered her ghost. People who wanted to honor her memory and perhaps help her find peace. The monument is simple. A small stone marker with an inscription that reads, "For Yuki, who is trying to get home." People leave flowers there, especially white ones, and small offerings like coins and notes. I visited the monument in 2019 on the 40th anniversary of the first reported encounter. There were dozens of flowers, many of them fresh. Some of the notes were heartbreaking. Messages from people who had lost loved ones in car accidents, people who understood the pain of sudden, unexpected death. "Thank you for reminding me that love never dies." It was written in careful handwriting, obviously by someone elderly. "Dear Yuki, I am 78 years old, and I have been following your story for many years. One note particularly stood out to me. My own daughter died in a car accident when she was 25. I'd like to think that somewhere, you and she are together, both finally at peace." That note captures something important about the expressway ghost legend. Some are horror stories that focus on the scary aspects of encountering a ghost. In interviews, Kawakami said she was drawn to the story because it represented something universal about human nature. We all want to be with the people we love. Death is frightening not because it's the end, but because it might separate us from the people who matter most to us. It's not just about one woman's tragic death. It's about how we process grief, how we keep our loved ones alive in our memories, and how we find meaning in loss. The story has also influenced popular culture. There have been movies, books, and TV shows based on the legend. But the better ones understand that this isn't really a horror story at all. It's a love story about a woman who loved her family so much that not even death could stop her from trying to get home to them. It's 2018. Japanese novelist Hiromi Kawakami published a book called The Long Road Home, which was inspired by the expressway ghost legend. The book tells the story of a woman who dies in a car accident but continues to appear to drivers, asking for help getting home. But in Kawakami's version, the ghost eventually finds peace through the kindness of strangers who help her understand that home is Unte place. It says the love we carry with us. It was 3 a.m. and she was just standing there, so still, like a statue. The book became a bestseller and was translated into multiple languages. "We all want to go home," she said. When Yuki offered to help, the woman shook her head. "I've been trying for so long," she said, "but I think I need to stop. I think I need to let go." Even as I'm recording this in 2024, reports of expressway ghost encounters continue to trickle in. They're different now. Influenced by technology, by social media, by our modern understanding of the paranormal. But the core elements remain the same. "Thank you for stopping," she said. "Thank you for caring about a stranger." In March 2023, a delivery driver named Yuki Tanaka, yes, coincidentally sharing the ghost's first name, posted about her encounter on Twitter. She was driving the overnight shift delivering packages between cities when she saw a woman standing by the highway. "At first I thought it was someone whose car had broken down," Yuki wrote, "but something felt wrong." Yuki pulled over and approached the woman, who turned out to be wearing a white dress that looked like it was from the 1970s. She looked at me with these incredibly sad eyes and said, "I need to get to Osaka. My family's waiting for me." But here's where the modern encounter differed from the classic pattern, and she smiled. Not the terrifying smile described in earlier encounters, but a peaceful, sad smile. And then she faded away, leaving behind only the faint scent of flowers. Yuki's tweet went viral, with thousands of people sharing their own experiences or expressing sympathy for the ghost. But what struck me about this encounter was how different it was from the earlier ones. Instead of Desper,
they called her the Black Dahlia, a name that dripped out of Hollywood gossip columns and crime blotters, like cheap gin behind velvet curtains. But before she was a headline, before she was a ghost that still haunts Los Angeles after midnight, she was just a young woman trying to make it in a city that promised fame, but mostly delivered broken dreams. Her real name was Elizabeth Short, born July 29, 1924, in Hyde Park, Massachusetts, fifth of 5 daughters. Her father, Cleo, once built miniature golf courses until the Depression ate his fortune and his pride. One morning, when Elizabeth was just 6, Cleo's car was found abandoned by a bridge. Everyone thought he jumped. He didn't. Years later, he turned up alive, living in California, like California was his escape hatch. Elizabeth grew up chasing something bigger. She had bright eyes, dark curls, a delicate way of talking. Friends said she wanted to be a movie star. Who didn't in 1940s LA? She drifted west in her teens, worked in diners, posed for photos she hoped might land her a break. She called herself Beth, sometimes Betty. She liked older men in uniform, soldiers, airmen, men who made promises on leave and then disappeared when the war ended. By January 1947, she was 22 and drifting through cheap hotels, friends' couches, bus depots. One week, she was seen at a hotel bar downtown, laughing with a man no one could name. The next, she was seen at a drugstore, then gone again. Hollywood devours hopefuls like Beth. They come with dreams. They leave in gossip columns or not at all. On the morning of January 15th, 1947, Los Angeles woke up to what would become the most infamous murder scene in its history. It was Leimert Park, then a quiet, middle-class neighborhood south of downtown. A mother named Betty Bersinger was walking with her 3-year-old daughter along South Norton Avenue. At first, she thought it was a discarded mannequin lying in the empty lot, pale, propped up, arms above its head. It wasn't. Elizabeth Short's body had been posed in the open grass, carefully arranged. She'd been cut in half at the waist, a surgical bisection. No blood at the scene. Whoever did it had washed her, scrubbed her skin clean, sliced her mouth ear to ear into what reporters would call a Glasgow smile. It looked staged, like the killer wanted it found, needed it found. Police and reporters swarmed the lot within an hour. Flashbulbs popped. Cops laid down tarps that did nothing to hide what people were seeing. The Los Angeles Herald-Express ran headlines that same day. Body of pretty girl cut in two. Overnight, Elizabeth Short, the forgotten wanderer, became the Black Dahlia. They called her that because of the movie The Blue Dahlia that had come out a year before, starring Alan Ladd and Veronica Lake. Friends said Beth liked to wear black dresses, dyed her dark hair jet black, a flower behind her ear sometimes. Hollywood gossip columnists loved it. The Black Dahlia. It sounded glamorous, terrible, beautiful, and ruined. Just the way Los Angeles liked its secrets. The coroner's report was worse than the headlines. She'd been tied up, tortured, pieces of her flesh cut away, rope marks around wrists and ankles. Yet her makeup was still faintly visible under the careful wash, lipstick smudged like a ghost smile beneath the brutal grin someone carved into her face. They found no blood, no murder weapon. Just a single heel print in the dirt, tire tracks. Los Angeles was bursting with drifters and movie wannabes. Every block a half-built dream. Whoever killed Elizabeth Short vanished back into that sprawl before the city even realized what it had lost. Reporters dug up every scrap of rumor they could find. They tracked down old boyfriends, an Air Force lieutenant, a bartender, a sketchy Hollywood promoter. They wrote that she was a party girl, or a drifter, or a tease. Some painted her as an innocent girl lost to a brutal city. Others twisted her into a black widow whose own choices brought the nightmare. But the truth was simpler. She was alone. She was vulnerable, and someone wanted her death to be seen, posed like a sick piece of art on a quiet neighborhood lawn. That same week, the Los Angeles Police Department started getting letters, ransom style, words cut from newspaper clippings, pasted onto envelopes. One read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings." Inside was her birth certificate, some snapshots, an address book, all wiped clean with gasoline to destroy fingerprints. The killer was playing with the press, the police, with all of Los Angeles. So here's a question for you tonight. What kind of monster kills like that, and then writes polite notes about it? Who stands in the dark with gasoline and a pair of scissors, chuckling at headlines, knowing he's turning a dead girl into Hollywood's grimmest rumor? It's 1947. There's no DNA. The city's top detectives work the case 24/7, but for every real clue, there are 10 fake leads, 100 drunks in downtown bars, bragging they did it for a drink and a warm cell overnight. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Short is buried in Medford, Massachusetts. Her mother never really believed the police would catch the man who did it. She died decades later, still waiting for a name. But the case never died. Some said the killer was a surgeon. Some said it was a cop. Some said it was the city itself, that LA eats its young, feeds on their beauty, and leaves only ghosts behind. This is only the start. The list of suspects grows longer than Elizabeth Short's obituary ever was. The moment Elizabeth Short's name hit every front page from LA to Boston, the suspect list grew like weeds after rain. Boyfriends, bartenders, movie men, mobsters. But one name keeps crawling back whenever you dig too deep into the Dahlia's open wounds. George Hodel, a wealthy doctor, brilliant surgeon, socialite circles. The kind of man who threw decadent parties in a Spanish revival mansion up in Hollywood Hills. The Soden House, they called it. An architectural fever dream of Mayan revival stone and hidden hallways. Some said it looked like a temple. Others called it a tomb. Hodel was charming, of course he was. Dark hair, pencil mustache, a taste for liquor and scandal. He moved in tight Hollywood circles. Artists, bohemians, actresses who never quite made it past the studio gate. And when the LAPD started looking at who could cut a body in half that cleanly, the surgical precision, his name made too much sense to ignore. Here's where it gets ugly. In 1949, just 2 years after Elizabeth Short's body was found, George Hodel's own daughter, Tamer, accused him of something unspeakable, incest. She was 14. He was arrested, put on trial. He walked free. The jury didn't believe her. Or maybe they didn't want to believe her. Meanwhile, the LAPD quietly bought his mansion. This is real. They wired hidden mics in the walls, listening while Hodel paced his Mayan temple at night, pouring drinks, bragging to friends. The transcripts, buried for decades, still twist the stomach. At one point, Hodel says, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they can't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary because she's dead." Think about that. A man alone in his home, mumbling in the dark, half daring the walls to accuse him. Who talks like that if they're innocent? And that secretary? Ruth Spaulding. She died in 1945, officially an overdose. But rumor says Hodel might have staged it after she threatened to expose shady abortions he performed in secret, under the table for Hollywood starlets who couldn't risk a scandal. Some nights I wonder, how many of LA's glittering secrets went through George Hodel's hands, cut open on a clean white table, no questions asked. Decades later, Hodel's own son, Steve Hodel, a homicide detective for LAPD, found the old wiretap files. He turned his father's name back into front-page horror, writing a whole book arguing that George Hodel didn't he just kill Elizabeth Short. He might have killed others too. The evidence? Hodel had surgical skill. He was in law when Beth died. He liked games, letters, puzzles, the thrill of dancing just out of reach of the badge. And that house, the Soden House, neighbors claimed they heard screams in the courtyard late at night. That backyard has drains built into the stone. Blood would disappear fast under a garden hose and a night fog. Hodel left LA not long after the heat got too bright. He drifted through Asia, came back only to die quietly in 1999. Never charged, never forced to confess. His son still calls him the Dahlia Killer. But the LAPD won't say so. Maybe they can't. Maybe they don't want to. Do you believe a man's own child would lie about something that monstrous? Or is it easier to think he saw a chance for a sick kind of fame? Here's the part that chills me most. The letters. Weeks after Elizabeth's body was found, the Black Dahlia Avenger letters arrived at the LAPD, ransom style, Newspaper clippings pasted like a child's prank. One read, "Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal." Dahlia killing was justified. Inside, pieces of her belongings. The killer taunting the city like it was a private joke only he could understand. Some people think those letters match Howell's style, precise, mocking, always one step ahead. Others think the letters were fakes, sick pranksters craving the spotlight. What's more terrifying? That the killer watched from a shadowed mansion while the whole city panicked. Or that a stranger, faceless, nameless, did it for no reason at all, then slipped back into the sprawl forever. The LAPD's files from that time look like a black hole of half-answers. Corruption rumors, bribes. Back then, LA was run by gangsters, shady studio fixers, and cops who might have buried inconvenient truths under piles of hush money. Elizabeth Short was just a girl trying to get noticed. In the end, she was noticed too much, and the city never let her rest. To this day, if you stand on South Norton Avenue, where Betty Bersinger found her, you'll find nothing but houses now. Quiet lawns, kids on bicycles, garden hoses coiled by the porch. But every so often, some night owl drives by, kills their headlights, and just sits there, wondering who did it, who got away with it, and why nobody ever paid the price. But the story doesn't end with George Hodel. There were other suspects, a pile of them. A drifter named Jack Anderson Wilson, who claimed he knew the truth. A shady bellhop. A butcher. A handful of dirty cops who might have known more than they ever said out loud. The truth is, Hollywood loves an unsolved mystery. It feeds the myth. It keeps the Dahlia alive, beautiful, dead, forever young, forever posed in that lot where she never asked to be famous. Some people think the answer is out there, waiting in yellowed files and forgotten confession notes. Others say the Dahlia wants to stay unsolved, that's more powerful as a ghost than she ever was, as a struggling dreamer in borrowed dresses. And so the city goes on. New starlets line up at casting calls. New drifters step off buses at the Greyhound Depot. The boulevard hums under neon. But somewhere under the hum, Elizabeth Short's name still whispers through the palms. After Elizabeth's body was found, and the Avenger letters started to land on the detectives' desks, Los Angeles turned into a carnival of whispers and dead ends. If you opened a paper that winter, you'd see her face. Black curls, soft eyes. Always the same studio headshot they printed again and again, until it didn't feel like a person anymore. It felt like a brand. A horror stamped on every street corner. The LAPD had a new lead every hour. A bellhop confessed, then recanted. A drifter claimed he deed on it with two friends in a drunken haze. Turned out he wasn't even in the state. One man, Walter Bailey, a surgeon who lived blocks from where Beth's body was found, died without ever being questioned properly. His family whispered for years that he might have been the real cut behind the smile. All told, over 500 confessions poured in across a decade. Some were jailhouse brags. Some were hoaxes from lonely men who wanted their names in the paper for a day before slipping back into the shadows. Some were heartbreakingly real enough to rattle the detectives, but every time they tried to match prints, match handwriting, match footprints in that vacant lot, the trail vanished like a ghost in the Hollywood smog. You'd think a city would let a dead girl sleep. But the press didn't stop. Reporters fought for scraps. Who was Elizabeth really? They painted her both ways, a sweet kid with movie star dreams, and a seductress who asked for the wrong attention. One paper even published fake stories about her secret life. Lovers she never had. Phone calls that never happened. It sold papers. That's all that mattered. You know what breaks my heart the most? She didn't have enough money for her own apartment. She bounced from one friend's couch to another, always a suitcase in hand. Hollywood does that. Promises the world, then lets you drift down a boulevard where someone like George Hodel might smile too wide and say he can help. Her mother, Phoebe Short, got the news in the worst way possible, through a reporter. He called her back east, pretending Elizabeth had won a beauty contest. Then, he milked her for sweet details about her daughter's childhood, her favorite colors, her old dreams, before telling her the truth. Your daughter's dead. Cut in half, posed in the dirt like a warning no one could read. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if Beth had caught the right break. A bit part in a cheap noir, a gig as a studio secretary, a bus ride home to Massachusetts before the worst man in LA found her walking alone on a January night. Instead, she became a symbol, the dahlia, a black bloom of rumor and dread. Tour buses roll down Norton Avenue to this day, pointing at that ordinary patch of grass where the ghost still lies down in the dark. People stand there at dusk, snapping selfies. Some leave flowers. A few swear they hear a soft voice in the wind. Just a breath. Nothing more. Maybe that's guilt. Maybe it's the city talking back. And the confessions? They kept coming long after the headlines faded. In the 50s, a drifter in San Francisco claimed he did it, then vanished. In the 60s, an old ex-boyfriend wrote a dying letter saying he helped cover up the scene. No proof. Even into the 90s, the phone at the LAPD's cold case unit rang now and then. Someone's drunken uncle on his deathbed saying he was the real Avenger. None of it stuck. None of it closed the door. The files grew thicker, yellowed around the edges. Detectives passed the binder down to the next man, then the next. And always the same question. How does a city lose a killer who brags, who writes letters, who poses a body like a puzzle nobody can solve? Some say it's because the truth was too dirty. That George Hodel knew people, doctors, cops, studio men with secrets worth burying alongside the dahlia. One of Hodel's friends was John Huston, the famous director. Did he know something? Or did he just enjoy the same parties? The same half-lit mansions where everyone pretended they didn't see the shadows moving behind the curtains? The deeper you go, the more it rots your brain. Beth, the real girl, she fades behind the legend. It's easy to forget she was just 22. Could have been your sister. Your friend on a bus bench, scribbling postcards home. She should have been someone's old grandmother by now, telling stories about a city she survived. Instead, she's still that black and white smile under the word unsolved. So, what do you believe? Did George Hodel carve her up in that Mayan house? Did the city look the other way because he knew where too many skeletons were buried? Or was it someone nobody ever named? A face nobody remembered passing on a Hollywood sidewalk? One thing's certain, the Black Dahlia's real killer didn't just murder a young woman. He built a ghost story that LA still can't shake loose. And somewhere in the hush of the palms along South Norton Avenue, that story still waits for an ending. Decades slip by, but Elizabeth Short never really leaves Los Angeles. She stays in yellowed clippings, in thick manila folders, down in the LAPD basement, in whispered tour bus spiels rolling past South Norton Avenue when the sun goes down and the palms sway just enough to make you shiver. Her grave is in Medford, Massachusetts, half a continent from the dusty lot where she was left for the city to gawk at. Sometimes people leave fresh flowers there. Sometimes they slip notes under the stone. I'm sorry. You deserved more. We haven't forgotten. Little gestures to a girl they never met but feel like they know, because the city never really let them look away. George Hodel's son, Steve, made it his life's mission to finish what the LAPD never could. A detective himself, decades on the force, he started digging through the boxes his father left behind. Cryptic diaries, photographs that looked too close to the crime scene to be coincidence. He points to the handwriting on the Avenger letters, to the surgical skill, to the wiretap quote, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia." He swears the house on Franklin Avenue, the Soden house, still hums with the truth, if you stand in the courtyard at night and listen hard enough. Steve Hodel wrote books about it, did TV interviews. He even chased DNA links to old evidence, hoping for a smoking gun. Some people say he's just trying to sell a story. Others say he's the only one who ever really cared enough to give the Dahlia her justice. And yet, even all these years later, the city still keeps its secrets. Modern DNA attests on what little's left: a tiny scrap of saliva on a stamp, a smudge on old evidence bags, come back inconclusive, too degraded, too touched by a dozen careless hands in the decades before anyone thought DNA could speak for the dead. It's almost like LA wants this ghost to stay half told. The myth is too good, too tragic, too seductive to close up in a single mugshot and a final confession. Elizabeth Short lives on in neon-soaked noir novels, in black and white crime shows that flicker at 2 a.m. when the city's too quiet, in horror movies and half-true podcasts. She's become every girl who ever stepped off a bus into Hollywood, hoping the lights would catch her in just the right way. But beneath the rumor, there's the real girl, Beth. If you stand in Lemur Park today, you won't see any sign telling you what happened there. There's no marker, no plaque, just ordinary sidewalks, families pushing strollers, dogs sniffing at the edge of the grass where Betty Bersinger's daughter once tugged her hand and asked, "Mommy, what's that?" Sometimes that's the cruelest thing about old cities. They pave over the screams, lay down fresh grass, let the stories slip into the roots, but they never really leave. So maybe it's fitting that the Black Dahlia's name still drifts through LA's restless nights. Maybe some mysteries need to stay open, so they can remind the rest of us that monsters don't just lurk in dark alleys or flicker across movie screens. Sometimes they wear sharp suits, pour smooth drinks, lean close enough to whisper promises you want so badly to believe. And maybe that's the real horror under the palm trees, that the city doesn't to just break your heart. It watches you disappear, then turns you into a headline to sell tomorrow's paper. So tonight, if you find yourself drifting off to the hush of rain and the soft hum of a story older than your parents remember, Elizabeth Short, not the Dahlia, not the myth, but the girl who just wanted to be seen. She got her wish, didn't she? But maybe not in the way she hoped. Sleep well if you can.